Hi, friends. Welcome to episode 24 of the Your Story Within podcast. I'm so glad you could join us. I'm really excited about today's episode. This is episode 24, and I titled it The Bronze Scar. It's actually named after a book that our author, our special guest, Dr. Stephen West, has written. He's going to share some information with us about that book. But before we jump into the book and before I bring him on screen, let me tell you just a little bit about Dr. West. So Dr. West, I actually know him as Chappie, and I'll tell you why in a minute, is the director of chaplaincy for the National Association of Evangelicals. His entire career has been dedicated to caregiving through his work as an emergency medical technician, police officer, military chaplain, and hospital chaplain. He also served in the United States Air Force as a chaplain. During that time, he served as a chaplain for two chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I first met Chappie in 2014 as part of the Department of Defense Executive Leadership Development Program, which was such a blessing. I got to travel a lot with Chappie to different assignments, and I really got to know him during that time. So I'm so excited to bring him on as our special guest today. Let me bring him on the screen. Hi, Chappie. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. I saw you, so it's a good day.
Good. Oh, see, you're so awesome. You're so awesome. So I'm so excited to have you on the show today. I want to talk about your book. You have a book called The Bronze Scar. Um, Before we jump in, though, because I know it's going to be a good conversation, before we jump in, I have a few questions to set the stage for our conversation. So I've had a lot of military people on the show. I have a large military following because of the work I do with the military. So why, Chappie, did you join the military?
It's an interesting question. Uh, Actually, the reason I went into the military when I was 18 years old was I was trying to get away from God's call to the ministry.
Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, I was I was preaching on Sundays as a fill-in preacher as a teenager, uh, and I got to where I had some every week. It just was every week somewhere else.
Wow.
And I was saying, ooh, I can do this like this on an interim basis and stuff, but I can't do this full time. It's not me. And so I joined the Air Force actually so that I could get away from the preaching part.
Isn't that funny?
It
God said, I don't think so.
is. And I'm glad.
So why did you choose the Air Force?
Okay. Well, I actually was going in the Navy as a corpsman.
Okay. Okay.
And so went and did all the paperwork, went up and did my MEPS things, my physical, and all these different things. And then the only thing I had left to do was to come back and be sworn in by the recruiter back in my home. And then we would send me off. So
Okay.
I came, it was appointment at 1 o'clock. And when I got there, he wasn't there. So I just sat there waiting. 1:15, still nobody. It got to about 1:30, and all of a sudden somebody stuck their head out of another door and said, "Are you okay out here?" And I said, "Sure, I'm just waiting for the Navy recruiter. I'm going in the Navy." And he said, "Well, do you need a beverage or something?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I take that. So let me get you a Coke." So he came and got me a Coke, and he said, "It's cooler in here than it is in the hall. You can sit down if you want to." And I sat down in his office, and lo and behold, before it was all over, I raised my hand for the Air Force.
Airport. Wow. I didn't know that story. That's so cool. Oh, there
No.
went Chance, our regular visitor. Very cool. That was so interesting. All because the Navy guy didn't show up. I'm gonna have to talk. I have a in Hampton Roads, there's a big Navy base here. I'm gonna have to talk to my Navy buddies about that. Like, what's the
Oh,
deal,
yeah.
you guys? We lost the good one. All right. So you did the Air Force. I know you retired from the Air Force. How many deployments did you do when you were in?
About, I think, 5 different ones.
Okay. Okay.
And so most of those, I mean, only 2 of them were in war zones.
Okay.
The others were deployed to a spot where things were bad, like Haiti, when things were really bad down there, and U.S. support group set up there. And so I was chaplain for them, and went above the Arctic Circle to Andoya, Norway,
Oh, wow.
in the winter. That's an interesting place, 300 miles inside the Arctic Circle there. And the snow was actually way up. You couldn't see over it. And they just cut paths out for you to walk. So it was a pretty good experience, though. I don't mind cold. That was beyond me.
Yeah, I'm from Wisconsin, so I know cold, but I don't think I know that kind of cold.
Really cold, for sure.
Yes, yes. Okay, so you retired from the Air Force in, I think it said 2015, is that correct?
That's correct.
So after that, did you go directly to the National Association of Evangelicals, or where did you land?
Well, actually, when we came down to Alabama, Birmingham area, where we retired, we were driving down from Virginia, of course, and taking a little time to do that. And my wife and I both talked about it and had talked about it. We don't know what God has for us. Hospital chaplain. I'm trained to be a hospital chaplain. I've pastored for years and years. So wasn't sure what the Lord wanted. And we got to our house, and of course, no furniture except the trailer that you brought with you. And so the next morning when we got up, I get a phone call, and it's from a past deputy chief of chaplains of the Air Force. And I knew him well. He had retired about 3 years before, but we never worked together and never had anything beyond that, conversations much at all. And he called and said, "Steve, my wife said I couldn't call you until you got to your new place. So I know you're there from Facebook." And he said, "Have you got a job yet?" And I said, "No, we were talking about that, like I said, on the way down, but we didn't put out any resumes or anything like that. My wife says I need to relax a few months and to wind down some." Yeah. And so he said, "Well, how'd you like to come to work for the National Association of Evangelicals after you fully retire then in a few months?" It was interesting, and I didn't think it would happen, but it did. And
it did.
We left 6 months later and retired, and then I became the executive director. So it's been that way ever since.
Awesome. Oh, you have such good stories today. See, I'm so glad you're on the show. We need to catch up. I'm learning all this new stuff now. Okay, so you wrote a book. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. All right. I don't have my podcast partner with me, so hopefully I'll do this right. All right, let's see. Okay, can you see that?
I see the top of it.
Oh, I guess I got to scroll. Okay, hold on. All right, there we go.
There you go.
I don't know why I know why. I got to do this. Fill the screen a little bit better. So this is Chappie's new book. Sorry, Dr. West.
Oh, that's fine.
The Bronze Star. This is his website, bronzestar.com, so you can check it out. You can actually, you're interested in ordering the book, you can get an autographed copy by the author right here. I'll just scroll a little bit so they can see it a bit. Oh, there he is.
Oh, gosh.
There we go. All right. Let me close that out.
That was an interesting view for me.
There you go. All right, so let's just dive right in now. Now we can jump in and actually talk about the book. So why did you decide to write a book?
I had never written a book, and I didn't like writing a lot. I'd had to do it during my time in education, schools, things, and work, but I didn't like it.
Okay.
And so one day at the NAE, the National Association of Evangelicals, I was talking to my boss, and I said, "Hey, I've got to step back for 2 or 3 weeks. Is that okay? I just need to cut back and just deal with maybe emergency things and stuff for a few weeks." And she said, "Sure. I mean, certainly you can do that. Do you mind me asking why?" I said, "No." I said, "It's just that my PTSD has really been kicking me lately, and I'm just not at a great point, and I need to not have so many things going on in my life right now." And she said, "What did you say you had?" And I said, "My PTSD." And she said, "You've worked here 4 years. I've never heard about you having PTSD. Nobody, none of us know you have PTSD." And I said, "Yeah, we get very good at hiding it."
Yes.
And
Yes.
so what happened was the president, we were in a staff meeting with him a few weeks later, and they asked me to share some. "Hey, can you share so the staff knows?" And so I did, and they asked me questions for a while. And then Leith Anderson looked at me and said, "Steve, you've got to write a book about this." He said, "This is amazing to me, especially when we had no idea." Well,
Right.
it went from there, and 30 months later, it came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm so glad you wrote the book. The again, everybody, The Bronze Scar. Why did you title it The Bronze Scar?
Well, it was a play on words, actually. My worst deployment was during the surge in Iraq.
Okay.
And so we brought in many, many more troops and equipment during that period of time in 2007, 2008. And from that, I was awarded a Bronze Star.
Okay.
And that was really the most humbling honor that I had ever had. And still today, it still is. It means so much to me. You don't expect it. As a chaplain, I certainly didn't expect it, but I was. And so when I got to the place where I was deciding on a title, I said, the worst time that I had, and that causes me the most trouble now with my PTSD, was that deployment. And so it was a wonderful honor to receive the Bronze Star, but it came with a price. Thus, the Bronze Scar. And
Gotcha.
the big thing is to talk about how it feels so that others can.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's
I imagined we hadn't talked prior, so I imagined there was a play on words of some sort of experience that caused you to come up with that title. Very fitting, especially what you've just shared. So in the book, I have a lot of different questions. So I have my little cheat sheet to help me out here. I have lots of questions, and I hope I don't jump around too much. This is, as my audience knows, this is all conversation. So you feel free to share as much or as little as you want, Chappie.
easy.
PTSD, the term or acronym, or I'm not sure how long it's been around. However, I know, I don't know how much you know about my background, but in 1987, I went through a very traumatic event. I won't go into detail because it's not about me today. But in 1987, that term, I never even heard of that term.
Right.
And it wasn't until, gosh, I think I was at the Navy Expeditionary Combat Command. I'd already been there 7 years, and I was working in the family readiness. I was working on a manual for, especially for our EOD folks, and we were working with Navy SEALs and some others to come up with this manual for some of the aftercare, pre-care, aftercare for all the deployments and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, we had a psychologist on the team, and they got to the chapter we were working on that focused on killed in action, and it talked a lot about death and all these things, and I just started sweating, and it was a huge trigger for me, long story short. And so that was 2000. So I'd say almost 30 years later, I finally actually got a diagnosis from the psychologist at the table, who said, we need to go talk. Anyway, my point being is, when I finally realized this was something that I wasn't crazy, because I know some of the terms and some of the questions I'm going to ask is, I constantly would say, oh, I'm fine. I'm always fine. And then there were other times where I always felt crazy. Like, am I crazy? What is going on? Anyway, so I'm going to talk about some of those things, but there's so many emotions you go through when you have PTSD, and you don't know when triggers will occur. And when I started doing research, I found that there's not as many books or information out there for family members, for just people in general. There's some from the military perspective, not a lot though. I thought there would be so much more. Anyway, all that to say, I'm so grateful that you did take the time to write this book. And I do want to jump back and get back on track, me and my tangents, and ask, what does it actually mean when people say, oh, I'm fine? Or, when you think you're crazy, why did you put those in the book?
My wife and I, for years, as long as I can remember, just like you were speaking about a minute ago, I ask, how you doing? Or she asked me, how are you doing? And sometimes we just end up saying, I'm fine. Everybody does that. Yeah. But the truth about saying I'm fine is it's usually a lie. We're covering up something. And so we call it, you'll have to excuse this part for me, but we say, you're using the F word. And so we know that's not what it means. And people with PTSD, any disorder that is an emotional disorder, they say that so many times because people ask and you don't know how to tell them. It's one of the problems. You know, with PTSD, people don't understand, but it's not their fault. It's on us to the point that we can't share it with them. And a lot of that is because when they're asking a particular question about it, I don't know why it is.
Right.
Why do you do this? And you think, I don't know. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I intended to do in the negative senses. But we use that over and over again. And I was writing this part because of that fact. And when I was writing it, I remember it being like on a Wednesday. And I wrote the section that talks about I'm fine. And then we, of course, during that time, it was COVID time, and we couldn't worship at church together. So what we were doing was they were, of course, were streaming it. And so we would watch every Sunday. And this particular Sunday, I was doing something on my iPad after it was over, and I hadn't turned it off, hadn't turned the TV off, hadn't moved from the stream, any of those things. And all of a sudden, a song came on. And the song is by Matthew West, no relation.
Yeah.
But it was the song Truth Be Told.
Yes.
And he talks about I'm fine. Yes, I'm fine. Oh, I'm fine. But I'm not. I'm broken.
Yes.
And I'd never heard the song before.
Okay.
And it sent chills through me because it touched. And the thing about that is that we cover up something when we do that. And
Right.
people that try to help us, of course, like in my wife's case, and all other people, because who doesn't say that sometimes?
Right.
And just think, Janine, how many times is it true?
Right.
Much.
Right. My it's interesting in our house, the Bennett house, because my husband has PTSD and I have PTSD,
Yeah.
but for very different reasons. My husband was in the military and medically retired, although his PTSD is not combat zone related.
Mhm.
His is because his kidneys failed and he had to have a kidney transplant. And so they call his medical PTSD. And it has his triggers are very different than anything that I go through.
Sure.
But when you talk about I'm fine, yes, I know the Matthew West song so well. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, he read my mind, how did he know that, And then the other thing with me, when I was younger, I shared my trauma easily. It was like I was talking about somebody else. And
Yeah.
my friends, my close friends, I have two friends, long-term best friends for 30 plus years. And they're like, Janine, you can't just bring that on someone. You're going to freak them out.
Yeah.
So then I kind of flipped and thought, oh, now I don't want to tell anybody because now I'm burdening someone because, like you said, they don't know how to handle it. So there's this in my mind, and I'm working through this, Chappie, but in my mind, there's always been this, how much do you share? And how much do you allow people to help you? I've gotten to a point where I do allow a lot more help now. I see the benefit in it and stuff, but
Right.
it's such a fine line because you just
It is.
don't know, you know.
Yeah. It's difficult. And actually, if people ask you about your PTSD, they know about it and they ask you something about it. You know, what happens, at least with me, what happens is it's not just I don't understand a lot of it, but also besides the understanding is the fact that I don't want to talk about it. Let's just be honest. Uh, it's not a pleasant conversation practically
Right.
anytime you're talking about it.
Right. You're
And
right.
so
You're right.
I think a lot of people, it's they won't get it. I'm not going to do that. And so you don't share. There's a number of reasons why you don't. Actually, it has to do with that protection piece. You're trying to shield yourself from disappointment because you end
Good.
up
Yeah.
disappointing others so much and disappointing yourself so much that sometimes it's just easier not to say it, not to talk about it.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. Well, like you, I also wrote a book and it did help. Mine's more a Christian women's Bible study focus, but I know it says in scripture we're to share our testimony so that others know what Jesus has done for us. So
Right.
I did mine, and I don't know if you saw it, was Broken to Beautiful. And that talked about my a couple of traumas I've experienced, but the major one, and but anyway, that was healing. So it's out there. And I remember, I don't know how you felt when you released this book, but I know when I released mine, there was a release
Yeah.
as well to say, okay, it's out. I don't need to keep it hidden away anymore. It's out there now. And there was this release. And then probably about an hour after I published, immediate panic set in. It's like, oh my gosh, I just told the entire world, because I put it on Amazon. So of course that's the world, right?
Yep.
In my mind, that I have an issue, or I'm dealing with something that all this time I've said I'm fine. And now they know I'm not. But I will say that I've gotten some really good feedback. I've been told by many women that it has helped them tremendously. So tell me, what did you feel when you put the book out, and what have people said about it to you?
Well, I appreciate the question, and I'll try to keep it very short because I have a tendency not to do that. But during those times, in writing about things in my life, the way I feel, the way I act, dwelling on certain chapters when I was doing anxiety or was doing anger or talking about medications or the invisible wounds, all the different things, then I was having to dwell for hours on a page to get a page done. And so it really puts you in it. So I was at a pretty rough place during the throes of doing this when I was talking about myself. But it was cathartic. That's what I tell people, because once I stopped writing, then I felt better. Actually, I felt better than I had in a good while. And it's not that I've beat it, so to speak.
Right.
Honestly, PTSD is not about conquering. It's about enduring.
Yes.
And, you know, they've said to me before, and I know, you have PTSD. It doesn't just go away. You can get it to the place where it possibly doesn't affect you or doesn't affect you as much. But it was a pretty good feeling to get it done. And then when it was published a few weeks ago, and I started getting feedback from people that would contact me, and some have told me their stories and things. And one talked about how I've never been able to explain this part. And now I have it. So for me, that's the greatest blessing and validation that can come from this. I wrote this because you don't start understanding, and you can't be aware unless you know what someone's feeling. You won't know it fully, but if you describe it, and I try to describe it when I'm starting to get anxious, what happens? What's going on inside? What's the tightening? What's the heart wanting to jump out of my chest, beating so hard I can feel it beating too? And so, you know, it was difficult, but it's worth it.
And this isn't one of the questions I planned to ask, but based on what you just said, did it manifest in any other issue for you? For instance, in my case, I discovered when I peeled back all the layers and when I forced myself to really examine some things, it told me why I'm doing really good now, a workaholic. I was very much a workaholic because that was the thing that made me feel good. I was good at work. I could pretend things didn't happen so I could focus on work, and I really threw myself into work, 70-hour week type stuff, and for years. Anyway, but doing the hard work and moving forward, I can say I'm not a workaholic anymore. I take Fridays off. I don't start till 10. I'm taking care of my health. I'm putting myself, God first, family, myself, but I wouldn't even make the list in the past. Because if I took care of myself, then I had to think about all those other things. So I had to keep putting everything else. So with that said, did you have those kind of issues where so you wouldn't have to deal with anything? Were you experiencing that kind of stuff or anything else?
Sure. And one of the things that happened, and at least in my case, in getting it finished and going to that point, it was interesting because I told you right at the beginning, I don't like writing, but I did learn to love it more. So it grows on you after a while,
Yes.
and you know, the writing also filled a void, and it had me thinking about this to try to figure out a way to not be so effective to people in what I do or what I say, and it manifesting itself that way.
Okay.
And so one of the great things I think is I don't react as much because I am more aware of what's actually going on inside of me, and I can catch it a lot more. Now,
Okay.
that certainly doesn't happen all the time. There are a lot of times when it doesn't, because it, like you said, triggers. That's why they're called triggers. They sneak
Yeah.
up on you.
Yes.
They just
Yes.
hit you out of nowhere.
Yes.
Whether it's a sight or a sound or a smell, or you look at something that reminds you of the trauma in your life.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what it is, triggers are the things that we at least need to try to avoid as much as possible. You know, I never know what's going to trigger me. I had something trigger me the other night, and it was pretty rough,
Oh,
and it was from something good. It was from something a person who was reading the book had posted, and had then sent me a message on. And what they did is just they talked about, this is kicking my tail reading this. It reminds me and brings back so many things. And Janine, that just hit me.
yeah.
You know, it shouldn't. The rest of the message was about the extra things that I never knew about this person.
Gotcha.
But it was just that. You don't know what's
Yeah.
going to do it. And one thing that I think that is important for people to know who don't have PTSD is, just think of it like this. A lot of times someone with PTSD will act in negative ways, counterproductive, hurtful ways. But the thing about it is, someone told me one time, one of my psychiatrists, who different ones I've had through the last 10 years, said, you know, my question to him was, I don't know why this bothers me. It's nothing. It shouldn't rise to the level of making me anxious or especially to be angry at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something that was really profound to me. And he said, Steve, you got to think of it like this. A person with PTSD starts with a glass half full of anxiety. And so it doesn't take much more for it to go over, for things to happen. And that's why people don't get it a lot of times. And quite honestly, why I don't get it sometimes
Right. Right.
is just that we start from a place where we don't have so far to go. They start from a place where it's nothing or very little. So they're not going to get angry about it because
Right.
it
Right.
never fills the glass. But when you start with a glass half full or 60% full or however you are that day, whatever's going on in your life, you don't have much of a percentage left.
Yes. Yeah. I don't tend to get the anger as much. I'm the shutdown type. All of a sudden, I'm the sensitive type. I'm the wounded victim. That's where I go, and I work hard to not be that, but that's where I go. And but I will tell you, it's good that we both share that, because just because you have the PTSD or any other condition, it's different for every person.
Of
Your
course.
trauma is different, your triggers are different, your reactions are different. I'll tell you, for 5 years after the incident for me, I could not look at the color purple. My father was killed in front of me. My stepfather was killed in front of me, and I held his hand while he was dying. And because he was shot in the head, I saw him turn purple. And for years, the color purple was a trigger. I couldn't, nothing purple. Today, I wear purple. It's one of my, favorite colors. It doesn't trigger that anymore. I can separate it. So there is hope in knowing that some of the triggers can go away. You can manage.
Certainly.
You can certainly change the meaning of them, I guess. I don't know what else you would call it, but so yes, again, just we all have different things, everyone, and we need to, give ourselves time, because our healing and the way we handle things, it's all individual. It's all individual.
Absolutely. And a case in point is, if you and I and a group of 3 or 4 other people see something traumatic happen, we may be standing together, but try to explain it. The police come and they talk to each one of you.
Right.
You all tell a different story in
Yes.
some ways, because it's how it affected you, what you centered in and focused on. And it can be, just in that case, it can be so varied. Plus, you got to throw in the fact that it has to do with your personality. It has to do with your values. It has to do with your faith. All of those things are different in the person next to you. And so it makes sense that the journey is going to be different for different people. The important part to me is making people aware, helping people understand. If someone with PTSD reads this and all of a sudden in one part or another, they say, "Oh, that's exactly me. I feel the exact thing that you're talking about. I think the exact things that you're talking about." It lifts a load in some sense, and that is somebody else has the same thing going on inside of them, and I'm not crazy. Because we ask ourselves that a lot through the events in our lives.
Yes.
It shouldn't be this way. Am I just losing it?
Yes. No, you're not losing it, but yes, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, but no, you're not. And so it's important that someone with PTSD hears someone else, whether it's written or spoken or any other way, that I'm like you. And that helps. The hope is that it also will help the family members and friends. Let's face it, they're victims in it. And they don't have the control we have. One of the things I say often is that PTSD takes away a lot of the control in your life. All of a sudden, there are things that you think, that you feel, that happen to you that are not things that you think should be there. And so someone else who loves us so much reading this can at least get some of what transpires in some of the ways someone acts, because they all of a sudden hear about the feelings. That's why I went with feelings, because I said, if what I would have loved is when this started to have something where people talked about these things that I talk about. What's happening when I isolate?
Right.
What's happening when other people are having conflict? That's one of the things I do. I avoid conflict so much more than I ever did in my life.
That's me.
I
Yes.
just can't take it.
Yes.
And I know sometimes that's tough because maybe it's not you, but two other people are having a conflict. They're arguing right in front of you, and you don't say anything. You just sit there, because if you get involved in it, it's going to really tear you apart,
Yes.
especially when it's people
Yes.
you love. And those people, you may know those people, and they both may have thought, well, why didn't you stand up?
See, that's where you go when you said, the thought, am I crazy? Am I, because I don't want anything to do with conflict. In my
Yeah.
situation, I saw conflict at its worst. It was domestic homicide. I saw it in my own home as an 18-year-old. And anyway, I want no conflict, none. My husband runs towards it. He's the opposite. He's like, where can I get involved? His triggers are different. Things are different for him. So when you said that, I was like, okay, I'm not the only one who doesn't like conflict.
And
So.
my life has been being involved in conflict, because that's how a minister ministers.
Yeah.
They hear and they advise on people who are having difficulties, whether it's inside themselves or with somebody else. So it's not my nature, but it is what's happened now. Now, I think it's good for me to say this right now, is that I avoid all conflict that I can of every kind. But at the same time, I cause a lot of conflict. Now,
Okay.
wrap your head around that one.
Yeah.
Say, I don't want to have it, and yet we create it.
Create it. Yeah.
And that's a place where you say, this thing really does have some control in your life, because the thing you stay away from is some of what you cause.
Right. So I cause it, I can see for sure, through control. I want to control things, in certain situations. Yeah. Oh gosh. Now you got me really thinking. See, I haven't finished the book yet, Chappie, because I just got it, and you published it recently. So I definitely have to keep reading it. But so I'll probably
Good.
follow up with additional questions and stuff like that. But well, going back to the book specifically, as you were writing and sharing, you talked about having some difficult moments, some triggers. And you kind of addressed this already, but what is your greatest hope that when people read this book, they're going to get this out of the book? What is your greatest hope for it?
Well, Janine, it's somewhat what we were talking about a few minutes ago, and that is, there's three primary groups that I was hoping to target: the person with it, the person who thinks they may have post-traumatic stress but have never been diagnosed. And the people who love the people who have it, who suffer from it. Because I think that understanding, and that's the main thing, I want people to understand the feelings. And I don't think there is much out there about how it feels. There's not much out there where a person just gets all their warts out in the open and become vulnerable in sharing it. And that's the kind of thing that helps me, though.
Yes.
You talk about self-help. There's all kinds of self-help books. There's all kinds of PTSD books, thousands. But what about the awareness that comes from reading about someone else's feelings?
Right. Now, what did your wife say when she read it?
Yeah, and you talked about earlier when we were talking about the not wanting to talk about it a lot of times. Now, I'm going to be open and honest here.
Okay.
And that is, my wife did not see the manuscript until a week before it was published, or 2 weeks maybe.
Okay.
I just had not shared with her. I just couldn't do it. And so, her reaction is, one, it validates some things that she thought. And I think that's something that helps to heal, is that when you can say, okay, I was thinking this, and I wouldn't have thought of it in this way, but it makes sense. And so the people you love are the ones that it hits the hardest. We've always said that we hurt those who are closest to us.
Yeah.
And that's because they see us like other people don't see us. We put on masks. I mean, think about people going to church. They can be arguing, the kids can be having a fit, and all these things.
Yes.
You can be upset. You get out of the car, you walk in, whether it's church or something else, and all of a sudden, how are you guys?
Right, exactly.
Everything is wonderful.
Family.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day out there. So, we hide things that we don't want others to see, and we don't want them to be disappointed in us.
Right. Yeah, so it's funny that you didn't share the manuscript with your wife sooner. I wonder if that's a commonality, because I didn't either. I didn't share the manuscript. Actually, I never shared the manuscript. I handed him the published book.
Oh,
and
he's in it. Some of it's about
he's in it. He's in it. He read it, and he was first proud and supportive. But then there was one little area that I shared that he had a different point of view on.
Sure.
And he said, I didn't want to take anything away from anything you said, because that's how you perceive something. Right. I don't perceive that piece the same way. I'm like, well, okay. But yeah, I didn't give it to him either.
And think about it. If we want to know how that actually feels when we're the one that writes it, just imagine if you or I or anyone else read a book about feelings 236 pages long about your spouse.
Yes.
Now, there would be all kinds of emotion, but one of the things would be, I just wouldn't agree with some of it.
Right.
Say, well, wait a minute. I don't see it that way, just like you said.
Right. Yes. Let's see. I should actually ask some of the questions here. Um, oh, you know what? I see it's not on the question sheet. So I discovered through a lot of different experiences that
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who have gone through things and a lot of people in close community. In fact, my next door neighbor, I helped her write a book, taught her the process.
Yeah.
Her daughter was killed in a high school shooting.
Mhm.
And you're like, what are the odds? My neighbor, my husband, I know other people, I worked with people at work. It's like you almost can't escape that bad things happen in this world. Things happen. And I was surprised to learn that there's just so many people that go through this. So I
Oh, yeah.
definitely think the bronze scar is for a lot of people, not just
Absolutely.
military. So audience, for my authors out there, if you're struggling with anything, doesn't matter that that you haven't served in the military. It's really deeper than that.
That's right.
And yeah, so I think it really touches a lot of people, a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
think about it. The symptoms that I talk about in different chapters that we've alluded to, it doesn't matter whether it's PTSD or not. Anxiety is anxiety.
right, right,
And now, what causes it and how you process it is different, but it's still the same, Janine. It's still the same.
right,
And so it's just like uh, a number of the stories in there, a lot of the stories that I move off of and talk about are from my experience as a chaplain. I guess the reason for that is that I wasn't a CEO, so I can't write it from that way. I wasn't a
right.
housewife. I can't write it from that way. I wasn't an entrepreneur. So it's from my life. But what I try to do in it is to talk about it in a way that anyone with trauma in their lives can read it. And they won't think, oh, well, I have PTSD. But they may think, just like on the I'm fine, oh, wow, how many times do I say that?
Yeah,
And what does it mean? Uh, PTSD is at the forefront of our minds these days. And much of that has to do with COVID. And we talk about the frontline workers and those
yes,
hospital first responders, you know, people that deal with directly with people who have been diagnosed with COVID. And they go through some really tough things, really hard things. But hopefully they will see in this same kind of thing that, oh, okay. And I did have 2 hospital assignments. Uh, I had a year of clinical pastoral education. I was an EMT, police officer. So, I may not have mastered any of them, but I certainly was a jack of all trades in the caring side of it. So,
right,
one of the things is this: if you're listening and you don't have anything like this, you don't know anyone close that does, you still know somebody. It may
right,
not be your inner circle. Maybe this will just help you understand them a little more. Again, let me say, not to condone their actions, because our actions are still actions. And if they're negative, they need to be worked on. So hopefully people will share it. We're working on a campaign now
okay,
because many people have said, hey, you need to get this out to other people. And so people have said, uh, how can I buy more for other people that I know? Well, it's simple. You just don't say one, you say two, three, four, whatever it is, and a number
Right.
of people do. But one of the things that we're wanting to do is to get it in the hands of people who wouldn't hear about it or are not going to buy it, and at least get it into their hands. So we're going to work it so that if people say, I want to buy X number at a reduced rate, of course, a much reduced rate. If I want to do that, then how do I get it out? Well, here's the way. When we bring this into the website, when we start posting this thing, once it's together, one of our desires is to get it, say, to people who are homeless.
Okay.
Okay, because think about it. What percentage of people that are homeless, it has to do with some trauma in their lives and might have PTSD. Many of them definitely have PTSD. So we're going to get it to rescue missions, to shelters, so that they can give it out to people they feel like need it.
Okay.
Or military, getting it to places where people might could use it that won't be able to pay for it. And so, hopefully that's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And I'm working to get something going so that there's a group of rescue missions that have almost 400 missions across North America, to try to get copies to them so that they can have them at their different locations.
Gosh, that sounds awesome. I can think of many places as well. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to learning more about that. And
good.
we'll
Thank you.
definitely share that with the audience. We may have to bring you back on so you can tell the audience about all that good stuff. And then, so you've written one book. Do you think there will be a follow-on?
Well, I don't know at this point. There are a few factors. One is, though I didn't think I would, I'm missing the writing. Which
There you
is
go.
something, it gave me something to focus on and to do. A number of people have said in some way or another is, you talk about the bad side a lot. You need to write one on the recovery, the hope, the faith,
Okay. Yeah.
these things that are there. And so, that's possibly one that will come, is just
Yeah.
dealing with, this is not dealing with the bad in a sense, it's just telling the truth about what's what.
Right. Right.
If I do
Well,
another one, it'll be easier to write,
yeah.
because it will be on the positive things you can do. How do you get help? What happens when you take this way to try to get help, or when you lean on your faith and things? So,
Well, I know, but before I left the command, they had some of the service members were talking about, I think it was the EOD side. One of the EOD members retired, wrote a book on PTS growth, I think they called it.
right.
And they talked about, how to grow from the trauma you've been through. And so who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows, Chappie? Maybe you got something,
So
on the
God knows
recovery and the hope side. So
yeah, God knows a lot better than I do whether that will ever even be attempted.
well, since you have the writing bug now and you said you like it, I'm gonna put my money on there's gonna be another book in the future.
We'll see.
But all right, is there anything else you would like to share about the book? I know we didn't really go through the chapters. You talked about anxiety. Is there anything
Right.
in particular you'd like to share before we close out today?
Actually, I think we've covered a lot of things here, Janine. I appreciate that you asked about a number of different things here. The most that I would say is, the same thing somebody said in a comment about the book recently. If I'd known this 10 years ago, I could have better worked with the person I love the most.
Okay.
I could have been more of a help because I just didn't understand at all what was happening. That is my hope and prayer, that people will find relief.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about the book and sharing about your experiences and the feelings. And I know we talked about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Friends, if you want to get the book, again, I have the information up on the screen. Thank you, Dr. West. Chappie, I could say a lot of different things, but I'll be formal, Dr. West. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for writing this incredible book and your heart for helping people. I know God will continue to guide you. You can run, but you can't hide. I feel another book coming. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so very much. And it's wonderful to connect with you again.
I know. It's good to see you again. Good to see you again. Say
Thank
hello to your wife for me.
I will do that.
Right. All righty. Well, thank you, Chappie. I'll catch you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you go, friends. We had Dr. Stephen West on the line sharing a lot of good information about his new book. I'm so glad you were able to join us. If you're catching this on replay, make sure you go back to the beginning and watch it all the way through. Dr. West shared a lot of really good information that I think could be helpful for you, especially if you suffer from PTSD yourself, know someone, or just aren't sure, but you're wondering. Check out his book, The Bronze Scar. I really think it would be a good tool to have in your toolbox. All right, friends, until next week, next Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard, same time, Your Story Within podcast. Thank you. Bye-bye.